be in school with you today, but I'm going to walk you through this worksheet so that you can answer the questions on your own. And I'd like you to submit this worksheet so I can check over your answers. But I'm going to read through the sources and I will address all of the points that I make in the questions. So we're going to learn the halacha lamasa, the practical law of what we keep. And the reason why I think it's really important to learn the practical law in this case especially is because we had a machloket, we had a disagreement in our Gemara between Rebbe and Rabbanan about whether or not you could say Shema in another language or if you have to say it in Hebrew. And as we saw in the Gemara, and we'll continue to see, this machloket about what language you can say Shema in actually lends to even more disagreements about halachot concerning Shema. I just want to focus on this aspect of, do I have to say Shema in Hebrew or can I say it in another language? Just because I think it's very practical and very important. Okay, so we're going to start with Rambam, and then we're going to see two other sources that comment on the Rambam. So the Rambam is Rav Moshe ben Maimon. He lived in the 1400s. He started out in Spain, ended up going to Egypt, and he wrote this book called the Mishnah Torah, which is a book of halacha. And he basically takes everything that we learned in the Gemara, he records it, but he also gives us the final decision of what we're supposed to do. So that's what he does in this case. So a person can recite Shema in any language that he understands. And whoever is going to read, someone who's going to read Shema in another language, they need to be very careful to avoid errors in the translation, to avoid errors or mistakes within that language that they're reading. And when they're reading those words in the other language, the translation, they should just be very careful to pronounce the words correctly, just like they should be careful to pronounce the words of Shema if they were reading it in Hebrew. So Rambam seems to be very clearly holding like the opinion in our Gemara that had said that you can say Shema in any language, which was Rabbanan. In addition, Rambam seems to be adding two very important points. So number one, Chachamim, the Rabbanan in our Gemara just said that someone can say Shema b'chola shon she'ata shomea, right? We learn from the word Shema, the fact that the Torah tells us you have to hear it, that you can say it b'chola shon she'ata shomea, in any language you could hear. So we had asked when we learned this, does that mean I could say it in any language I want at all, or does it have to be a language I understand? If it's just about hearing, right, if b'chola shon she'ata shomea, if shomea there means just hearing, then it should be any language. I could get a transliteration of Chinese and then that should work, even if I don't know Chinese. Or is it that I can only read it in a translation to a language that I understand? So Rambam is interpreting Chachamim's opinion, Rabbanan's opinion, that in fact I need to understand the language in which I'm translating Shema. So that's point number one. Number two, Rambam adds to Chachamim's opinion that if you are going to go the route of translating Shema to another language that you understand better, then you need to be very careful with how you translate it and how you pronounce it. So Rambam's kind of adding these extra requirements to Chachamim, to Rabbanan's opinion. So that's Rambam's opinion. Now we see the Hasagot Haravad, right? He's kind of pronounced this Ravid. The Ravid was a commentator on Rambam's Mishnah Torah, but he wasn't a typical commentator. He actually really came to critique Rambam's Mishnah Torah. He really didn't like a lot of what the Rambam said. He wrote like a lot of arguments against him, sometimes even kind of insults against him. He felt very strongly in opposition toward a lot of what Rambam wrote. So on this part of the Rambam, the Ravad says, Ein ze mikubal. So this is not accepted, right? We don't accept the Rambam's psak here. We don't accept the Rambam's decision, right? Ein ze mikubal al hadad. This is not accepted. It's not like, everyone knows that we don't accept this. Lefisha kol halashonot pirushin. Because any translation, any language in which you're going to translate Shema is going to be a commentary. It's going to be an interpretation. So you're never going to get close, exactly what the meaning of Shema is if you translate it to another language. Umi dakdik achar perusho. And who's going to be careful enough to find the perfect translation, the most precise translation? So, right, the Ravad is making 2 points, right? Number one, any translation is an interpretation, so therefore you're not going to get the real meaning of Shema, the true meaning. And number two, even if you could find something very, very close, no one's going to, do the painstaking job of finding like the only exact translation. No one's going to do that. Okay, so that's the Ravad. Now we have the Kesef Mishnah. The Kesef Mishnah is also a commentary in Rambam. The Kesef Mishnah is a commentary that was actually written by Rabbi Yosef Cairo, who ended up writing the Shulchan Aruch, which is a separate book of halacha. But this is Rabbi Yosef Cairo's commentary on Rambam. So he often, in contrast to the Ravad, he comes to defend Rambam a lot. He comes to explain him, defend him. So here he explains Breit Sham, Daf Yud Gimel Amud Aleph, right? He's referring to our Gemara in Masachet Brachot 13a. Plugta de Rebbe v'Rabbanan. We have a machloket between Rebbe and Rabbanan. Upasko keRabbanan, and Rambam decides like Rabbanan. Chada mishum de'ein halacha keRebbe michavirav. The first reason why Rambam does this, right? Rambam doesn't just decide, I like what the Chachamim say. It sounds nice. No, Rambam makes his halachic decisions based on halachic precedents, right? And other rules that we have in how we decide what the halacha should be. So number one, there's a rule in general that we say that if we have a machloket between Rebbe and everyone else, right? Rebbe and the majority opinion, then the majority opinion wins. That's just a general rule that the Kesef Mishnah, brings up here. It's a rule that Rambam didn't invent. It's a rule that we see throughout the Gemara. And in addition, ve'od distam lantana dematnitin kavatayu besota parak ve'elu namrin. So we also, in addition, we have an anonymous Tana of a Mishnah in Masechet Sota that rules in accordance with the Rabbanan. So, right, the first reason was that we just have a rule in general that if we have Rebbe versus Chachamim, then Chachamim win. And the second thing is that in addition to this machloka, there is another anonymous Tana that's quoted in Masechet Sota who rules just like the Chachamim. And therefore, it's not, a machloka of Rebbe versus Rabbanan only, but now we have a machloka between Rebbe versus Rabbanan plus this anonymous Tana in another Mishnah somewhere else. So it kind of becomes majority rule in terms of the amount of opinions that say that you can say Shema in any language. All right, I hope you guys enjoy this, and I will see you all tomorrow.